I wasn't involved in the investigation. I didn't know Don Bolles. But I had told Ben my story a long time ago and was included in this, and I'm glad I was. Before I start, I've heard so much demonizing and villainizing of the media in the last 48 hours by one of our presidential candidates, and I don't want to make this political, but I got to tell you, we're here tonight because we recognize, we honor, and we remember Don Bolles for being part of the media, part of that group of people that ask tough questions and puts themselves at risk. And you may have a problem with a story that's written or a TV feature, but I think everybody in this audience recognizes the trouble we would be in without the media. And Don is at the top of that list. All right. In 1976, if there were a fifth floor, and we looked over in that direction, we would have seen my parents' store in Park Central. My folks had Leonard's luggage. Oh, I love those little outbursts of recognition. Somewhere up there, my dad is smiling. On June 2nd of 76, I was in Erie, Pennsylvania, announcing the horse races at Commodore Downs. I was in a cabin with my then wife, my 2-year-old daughter, and I talked to my mom a lot. I wasn't a mama's boy, but I love my mom. I love her today. She's been gone for 14 years. Talked to her 3 or 4 times a week. I called my mom. She picked up the phone at the north door of Leonard's, which was just to the west of Goldwater's on the north side of Park Central. We hadn't been talking 2 minutes, and we heard the explosion. I've never heard anything like it to this day on the telephone. It was so loud. And I asked my mom, I remember saying, "What was that? What was that?" And my mom didn't answer. And I was momentarily concerned, and she said, "I don't know. I think a jet plane might have hit a building." So she got off the phone. She called me back about an hour later, and all she could tell me at that point was there had apparently been an explosion with a car. The sound of the phone call, where I was at that moment, is so painfully ingrained in my memory that when I got to meet the Bolles family today, it hit me pretty hard. If it's ingrained in my memory, Rosalie, I have no idea. The second point of my story. When I got out of college, I announced the horse races at Prescott Downs. And as I said to the group today, my parents were so proud. I wanted to do it. I worked for the Funk family. The Funk family in those days ran the Greyhound parks, the Greyhound racetracks, and also Prescott Downs in partnership with a company that was one of the last things Don Bolles verbalized, Emprise. For 2 summers, I got paychecks from Emprise. So when I heard that Emprise had, in 76, I was out of town half the year for several years leading up to that. I wasn't surprised Emprise was being investigated. I didn't know about Don writing about him. It added to my connection, tangential though it is, to this story. The third part of my story, and I really hesitated about mentioning this, but it's the spookiest part of my story. I moved up in horse racing. I announced the races at Turf Paradise from 72 through 78, the year after Don was killed. Kemper Marley's name was being thrown about quite a bit. You've got to understand, I announced horse races. Kemper Marley's horses crossed that finish line first an incredible number of times. He was a past member of the Racing Commission, lost his post in large part due to articles written by Don. I never met Kemper Marley, but as I'm reading about him and hearing about him, I simply walked from my announcing booth into the press box, and this was my question. Can anybody tell me what's Kemper Marley's story? The man who represented the Daily Racing Form, who had been in that press box since they built Turf Paradise in 1954. The elder statesman of the group got up from his chair, came over, motioned for me to go back into my announcer's booth. He closed the door, and he sat in my chair while I stood, and he said, "You've got a big mouth, and it gets you in trouble. Take my advice. Don't ever ask that question again." He got up, he walked out of my booth, he closed the door behind him. And I feel like leaving that story out on this day would be an injustice. I'm glad so many people felt compelled to come here to remember Don Bolles.